our series of Islamic heroes at the end, so make sure you stay tuned for that.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah ba'd. Well, thanks and praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for we seek His help and His forgiveness, and we seek refuge of Allah from the evil and ourselves and the consequence of our evil deeds. Whoever Allah guides will never be astray, and whoever Allah leads astray can never find guidance. And I bear witness Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Allah's final messenger. This is inshallah the last session when it comes to the heroes of Islam, and I feel as though it's only right to end off with specific stories about companions. We mentioned Khalid bin Walid, we touched briefly on Salman al-Farsi, and last week we mentioned certain scholars. And all of these individuals play a significant role in Islam, but I feel like I said it's only fair to end off discussing his companions in general, right? Because these were the pioneers when it came to Islam. Firstly, of course, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? The one who Quran was revealed to, biggest figure in Islam. But afterwards, it comes down to the companions that were responsible for spreading Islam. The companions were responsible for bringing Islam to different lands, and at the same time preserving it. An example would be the Quran itself was not compiled when it came to it would be being written physically. It was after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the companions who had learned the Quran, they sat down, and those that were learned in the Quran, they gathered each other, and they wrote down the Quran out of fear that the Quran would be lost. Right? So the Quran before was strictly from word to mouth, and it was taught by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the companions, who then memorized it down to the dot, but out of fear again. For the fact that Islam was in an Arab land at the time, but Islam was to spread, Islam was to go, Allah had this written. So they, out of fear of losing the Quran and for it to be taught, they wrote it down. And this was the responsibility of the companions, right? These are the people that are to be accountable for this, in a good sense. So there's certain stories about certain companions. Like I always say, that's important that when we talk about the story of the companions, that we understand the lessons behind it. And why it's important to talk about this is because we hear these stories in regards to character, these stories in regards to things, and integrity, and all of these are about the companions. For example, in regards, there's one thing that's always sat with me pretty strong, right? The companion, there was a companion, I don't know the name of the companion, forgive me, but there was companions in general that would hide their good deeds, like people would hide their sin, right? And that's one thing that sat it's always something that I remember. I mentioned this to my mom as well. In regards to good deeds, right? Everyone's inclined to hide their sins. Everyone is always focused on hiding their sins. Everyone always wants to hide their sins, right? No one wants to be known for their sins. And all of us have sins, not only me, every single person here, right? That's just the nature of human. It's just the way Allah made us, right? But the best of those that sin are the ones that go back and repent. Different topic all the time. But the companions, out of sincerity and out of fear of Allah, and out of sincerity to the deen, they would hide their good deeds like one hides their sins. And there's also an example in the hadith, the 7 that are given shade on Yawm al-Qiyamah. One of those individuals is the one who fears and weeps out of fear of Allah in private. And another one was who gives with their right hand to the point where their left hand does not know. Meaning that they give so sincerely for the sake of Allah that, again, I would hope everyone here, their left hand is attached to their body, right? Same body in which the right hand is. So their right hand gives to the point where their left hand doesn't know. That's how sincere they are. And those individuals are given shade on Yawm al-Qiyamah, right? So to continue, the first example is that of Umar ibn Khattab, who was one of the Khalifas after the death of Rasulullah, and that history lesson is for another time. But the reason why I mention him is because there's a story in regards to his death, right? And there's so many things that are going on, and that's, again, a topic we can talk for another time. But the background or the assassination, as soon as, so the story goes, as soon as he heard the takbir, I heard him say, the dog has killed or eaten me when the murderer stabbed him, right? So he doesn't know that he's been murdered. And as the right? When the murderer stabbed him, a non-Arab came carrying a double-edged knife and stabbed everyone who passed by the right and left side, stabbing 13 people, out of whom 7 died. When one of the Muslims saw that, he threw a cloak on him, realizing that he had been captured. The individual who killed or was stabbing the Muslims, he killed himself, right? Knowing that the punishment that comes after this is going to be severe. So to avoid that, he kind of took himself out. Realizing that he had been captured, he took his own life, took the hand of Br and let him lead the prayer, right? So keep in mind, the man has been stabbed, alright? Those of you that know, it's not an easy feeling, obviously, right? He's been stabbed. So after he's been stabbed, again, there's so many things that are going on. One could scream, one could do this, one could do that. But the companions were so strong in their faith, number one. And number two, Umar ibn Khattab specifically, his focus or his priority was what's going on when it comes to Salah. So he takes the hand of Umar ibn Khattab, and he directed him to lead the prayer, right? Because he's not in the condition to lead the prayer. Those who were standing by the side of Umar saw what I saw, but the people who were in the parts of the mosque did not see anything, but they lost the voice of Umar and they were saying, SubhanAllah, SubhanAllah. Br led the people a short prayer. When they finished the prayer, Umar said, Oh, Ibn Abbas, find out who attacked me. The slave of an individual. At that, Umar said, the craftsman, and Ibn Abbas replied, yes. Basically, they're identifying the person, right? But this is separate from what I want to talk about. Umar said, may Allah destroy him. I only treated him well. All praises are for Allah who has not caused me to die at the hands of a man who claims to be a Muslim. No doubt you and your father, Abbas, used to love to have more non-Arab infidels in Medina. Abbas had the greatest number of slaves. It goes on. And there's one specific thing that the narration describes how Umar bled heavily and fainted, right? So he bled heavily, got stabbed, he's fainting, he's unconscious. First thing he does is he takes the head of Abdurrehman and go lead Salah. And the narration continues, when he awoke and saw the people around him, the first thing he said, have the people pray. The first thing he said, after he's been stabbed, after he's bleeding out, after he's unconscious, have the people pray. When he was told that they had, he said, there is no place in Islam for those who leave the prayer. He then performed the wudu and prayed with his wudu leading heavily. This is the examples of companions, right? And now for us, may Allah guide us all. Salah time comes, I'll play this afterwards. Salah time comes, I'll go do this afterwards. Salah time comes, you know what? It's okay, no problem, I'll excuse it. This man has been stabbed, is bleeding out, is unconscious. First thing he wakes up, he's unconscious, he sees people around him. No, am I alive or am I in heaven or, no, none of this, where's the guy, is he taken or what's going on? No, have the people pray. And he himself, after being injured, gets up, makes a little praise. He doesn't want to skip Salah. Not only, first and foremost, is this showing the importance of Salah, but secondly, this shows the dedication to the deed that the companions had, right? Think about this. How many times do we make excuses for ourselves when it comes to Salah? Right? Skip Salah. I've seen people, I'm studying for my exam. Allah's the one that's going to give you that 100 weeks, skip Salah for it. Right? I have to get over here. Allah's the one that's going to take you there. Your lips, your breathing, your walking, everything is from Allah. Right? You're skipping Salah to do those things that Allah gave to you. Right? And it's small minor things. Things such as, studying. You see that funny example of Shaykh, can I skip, fasting? Yes, if you're student, you guys that quick, right? Now I get some odds over here as well, right? These small things that absolute Salah is not getting in the way of any of these things. It's just we make it a burden. So our Salah becomes a burden, right? We think of it as a burden, we view it as a burden, but in reality it's not getting in the way of anything. But on top of the fact that we're skipping the Salah for this action, skip our Salah in general, right? The quality of our Salah, the amount of our Salah, right? 5 times a day. Oh, you know what? Today I'll do 4, today I'll do 3, today I don't feel like praying. No, you stick by your Salah, right? And this is important. Why? Because Salah is a pillar. And I always say this so many times. You guys probably have this on repeat and slating your sleep. You say, playing in your sleep. Salah is the gateway to blessings, right? 5 prayers a day. Let's see who's good at math. I always ask this question, right? How many prayers a day? On average, on average, let's say each prayer takes 10 minutes. Some may take less, some may take more. On average, let's say 10. Right? 5 times 10? Or it should be 50. 5 times 10 again. Alright, one more time quicker. 5 times There you go. I think that was the first one, right? 50 minutes a day for the total for our salah. How many minutes are in an hour? Thank you. Right? They're beating you to it. How many minutes in an hour? There you go. 60. So 60 minutes in an hour, less than an hour. How many hours are in a day? So these guys are fast for that, right? 24 hours a day. So less than 1 hour a day, right? In accumulation, not just one salah. In total, less than 1 hour out of 24 for your prayers. When one puts it like that, it's in terms of time, it's insignificant. But in terms of value, in terms of reward, in terms of significance in Islam and obligation, it's very heavy. And we're putting this thing aside, right? So it's important, first and foremost, one stays by the salah. That's no. Number two, this is the dedication that the companions had to their deen, right? The man's damn near about to die, and he's worried about having people pray. He was leaving the salah, but he made sure that someone else replaced him for salah. Once he woke up, had the people finish praying, got up and prayed himself. How many of us, right? Forget about being stabbed. We got a little bit of a scab on our knee, we fell down or something, we got a little bit of a boo-boo, and now, I'm going to skip my salah, right? Or if we pray, for example, by the way, there's a whole fiqh ruling when it comes to sitting and praying, right? We'll find any excuse to sit and pray. I've seen this happen so many times, right? Someone will twist their ankle, small little thing, doesn't matter, and I'm going to sit down and pray, I'm going to skip my prayer, right? A companion bled out, and he still got up and praying. This is the dedication that they had to the deen. And these qualities of dedication to the deen is what allowed them to pioneer the deen, right? So many examples of companions, when the revelation came down in regards to making a specific thing haram, they would drop that action right away. Right? And think about it like this: us, we grew up with Islam. For most of us, we grew up with Islam. We were going to Muslim households, right? And what happens? We were surrounded by the deen from the get-go, right? And even then, it becomes difficult for us to drop things. It becomes difficult to drop haram things. It becomes difficult to do that which is halal. And these companions who lived their entire life into adulthood, right, into maturity, they lived their entire lives doing that one action, and the revelation came down and immediately it was dropped. Immediately. This is the dedication that they had to the deen. Now, that was one thing that came to mind, the example of Ibn Khattab. But we'll speak about a few more companions. We'll take some questions and we'll wrap up soon, inshallah, right? So a companion, Abbad bin Bish, may Allah be pleased with him, was a companion who was known for his worship and knowledge. One day, he stood up for prayer while absorbed in recitation, meaning he was in the zone, he was reading, and he was connecting with the verses, right? He was absorbed in recitation, and a stranger stalked the outskirts of the valley in search of Muhammad ﷺ and his followers. From a distance, the man saw the figure of the companion, so he silently drew his bow and fired an arrow which embedded itself in the companion's flesh. Right? So seeing a figure, probably saw him praying, assumed it was Muhammad and the follower of Muhammad, right? Took out his bow, pulled one on him, and what happened? It hit the companion, and it was inside the flesh of the companion. Calmly, the companion removed the arrow and went on with his recitation, still absorbed in his salah. So this man, once again, has been hit by an arrow. And this isn't these little Walmart play darts that are, I'm talking like this is sharp, right? Hence why it embedded and it got inside the companion. So he takes out the arrow, and what does he do? He continues his salah. Still absorbed in his salah. The attacker shot 2 more arrows, which also found him. So it wasn't 1, it wasn't 2, it was 3 arrows that hit the companion, and the companion was still in his prayer. So he hasn't left his prayer yet, which also found him working. The companion pulled him out and finished his recitation. The companion continued the prayer to its end and then said to Ammar, another famous companion of Rasulullah, get up and stand guard in my place, I have been wounded. Right? Get up, take my position. Right? He reached from his position. Take my position, I have been wounded. Ammar stood up, may Allah pleased with him, and seeing them both, the attacker fled into darkness. Right? So seeing that he was outnumbered, 2 people, he shot his shot, and on top of that, now he's left, right? He's ran away. Ammar turned to Abbad saying, why didn't you wake me up when you were hit by the first arrow? Why didn't you wake me up when you were hit by the first arrow? The companion then replied, I was reciting verses of the Quran which filled my soul with awe. and I did not want to cut short that recitation. SubhanAllah. Right? He was so embedded in what he was reading. He was connected with what he was reading to the point where he's shot by not one, not two, 3 arrows, right? And again, it's not something small. Again, we have medicine now, really different things, you know. He's shot by an arrow, takes out the arrows and continues prayer because of the fact that he was in all of the verses that he was reading. Meaning he was, the verses were hitting him. The verses, he was understanding them, he felt the connection with the verses. He was in all of the verses and he took out the arrows and continued praying. After he finished praying, then he woke up the companion to take his position. This is the dedication that they had to the deen. And at the same time, it serves 2 lessons, right? First and foremost, about the companion, and it should inspire us to be that focused in our deen, right? Because this is a level that I'm not too sure of how many people are, myself included, right? It's a reminder to myself before anyone else. You don't know how many people are on that kind of level. That's a different level of dedication, right? First of all, we barely focus on our soul, let alone focus on what we're reading. That's number 1. Number 2, it goes to show the value or the heft of the words of Allah. For those of you that know Arabic, I always recommend this to people, learn first, myself included, right? Learn first, learn the Arabic of the Quran. It's different from the Arabic, that people speak in terms of dialect nowadays. There's no way to replicate the way the Quran is. And the way Allah has written the verses, it's almost, the words flow in such a manner, the words come in such a manner that it's only able to be understood by one that learns that language, right? But even aside from that, the heft and the meaning and the power of the words of Allah are so strong. A man's been shot by an arrow 3 times, he still wants to keep reading the verses. Right? So this book of ours that we have on the shelf, it's not only there for just entertainment purpose, it's not only there as a decoration, right? My culture, they wrap it up in a cloth, put it up in a shelf, that's it, they don't see it ever again. So the guest comes and take it out and put it on the table, to make it look nice. That's what happens, that's what the Quran is nowadays to people. But it's important that you understand it, you read it, right? Understand why. Why is it that, what is it that this companion is reading that he's been shot 3 times by an arrow and he still wants to keep reading? Take part in it, read it. It's not like it's not accessible to you. Pick up the Quran and read the Quran and you'll understand, right? That's another way to increase the khushu' when it comes to Islam. And whatever it was, whatever hardships the companions faced, their deen came first. If you look at the example of Salahuddin Ayyubi, right? We talked about him. One of his key things to success, and regardless of whatever position he had reached, he never left his deen. He never left his deen. To the point where his deen was very, very prominent in the way he went about his political affairs, right? Letting go of some ransoms. People want to flee, make way for them, right? People had to pay a ransom to get out of that land, cause no problem. He let them go without that ransom. And this is one of the key figures to their success. Another companion, Abdullah ibn Abd, may Allah be pleased with him, was the son of the famous companion Ammar ibn As. He was committed earnestly to serving the deen of Allah, so much that he had to be forced by his father to get married. Right? He was so dedicated to the deen that he forgot about everything, and his father had to force him to get married. He had to force him to get married. On his wedding night, Abdullah ibn Abd asked his bride permission to offer 2 rak'ahs of salah. She granted him permission, so he went off to pray in his khushu' of conversing with Allah. He forgot all about his bride and continued praying until the adhan of Fajr was heard. Next day, he promised himself to tend to his bride. The second night, he requested his wife once again to offer 2 more rak'ahs. Again, the same thing happened, and he was praying until Fajr. This happened thrice in a row until the father came to him on the 3rd day. Until Amr came on his 3rd day to check up on his daughter-in-law and asked about his son Abdullah. So she told him the whole story. The father grabbed the son by his neck and took him to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to remind him about the rights of others and our bodies on us. Right? So he was so focused in his salah that he forgot about everything. Right? The way men are working, you can see how this is a very big thing. His father had to take him, grab him by the neck, took him to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could remind him that your bride has rights upon you, your family has rights upon you, and your body itself has rights upon you. And just because salah is an action that has high virtue, doesn't mean that you stay for Allah 24/7 and you neglect the rights of others, right? So he was taken to Rasulullah for that reminder. Abdullah ibn Abd hence reported that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Have I not been informed that you offer prayer all day and fast all night and fast the whole day?" He said, "Yes, companion." He said, do not do so, offer prayer at night and also sleep. Fast for a few days and give up fasting for a few days because your body has a right on you and your eye has a right on you. And your guest has a right on you and your wife has a right on you. I hope that you will have a long life and it is sufficient for you to fast for 3 days a month as the reward of a good deed is multiplied 10 times. That means if you have fasted the whole year, I insisted on fasting more. So I was given a hard instruction. I said I can do more than that in regards to fasting. Fast 3 days a week. Basically, they go back and forth in regards to, because the companion is so inclined, right? Imagine, this is the Prophet of Allah, telling the companion, like, calm down, like, that's basically what's happening. They're so inclined, and I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to pray, I want to fast. But Rasulullah says, relax, calm down, You have rights, Islam only isn't just salah, right? There's more to Islam than that. Fast as Allah's Prophet, David, half of the year. He used to fast on alternate days, and he wasn't given further permission. Meaning, the most he allowed was for him to fast one day, not fast one day, fast one day, not fast one day, right? But the point being, right? The point being, 2 things. First and foremost, right? We'll talk about Islam for a moment. Islam is a balanced religion. Islam is not meant to be a burden. Islam is meant to be just balanced, right? Yes, salah is important. And I can talk about salah for hours and hours. But this doesn't mean that if you stay in sujood 24/7, you have families to take care of. You have your own body to take care of. You have to feed yourself. You have to give yourself food so that we can go out, provide for your family. You have to provide for that family. There's other things in Islam aside from salah. Now this doesn't demean the value of salah, but it just goes to show there's other responsibilities as well. Once you have fulfilled your obligations, then you can move on to things that are voluntary. Allah and the Rasulullah do not say sujood 24/7. Ignore your family, ignore your missus, ignore everyone. No, that's not what Islam says. Islam says, look, balance. Here are the obligations, right? These are the obligations. These are things that are voluntary. These are things that are recommended. Go about it in such a manner and make sure that you knock out everything. Make sure that you do everything properly. Make sure if there's someone there, you fulfill that the right that they have upon you, right? Balance. That's what Islam is about. That's number one. Number two, the companions, right? The companions were so inclined to do good that even Rasulullah had to tell them to calm down. That's number one. Number two, and number three, another point that comes to mind, and this is the paraphrase the hadith, right? Rasulullah says people will come after the companions, right? And they'll be like family. Or there was I don't remember the exact word of the hadith, forgive me, but the hadith mentioned, right, where Rasulullah called the companions a certain title in terms of like a family relation, right? And a certain group of people were given a rank or a title that was higher, right? For example, a cousin comes lower on the hierarchy than a brother, for example, right? Makes sense? So again, forgive me for not having the hadith on hand, but Rasulullah was mentioning how there will be people that come after the companions that will be, they were given a higher title. And they asked them, who are they? Right? They asked the companions, asked, who are they? And Rasulullah said, no, Rasulullah, right? But how come those that come after the companions were of higher status from the call? The companions saw Rasulullah. The companions sat with Rasulullah. If I told you to believe in something and I show it to you, it's easier than if I tell you to believe in something and you don't see it. Right? That is true faith. That is true love. That is true sincerity. Right? We have not sat with Rasulullah. May Allah allow us to sit with him in Jannah. Say it. There you go, right? We haven't sat with Rasulullah. We haven't seen Rasulullah. So the fact that some people's hearts are still so tender to the point where they cry about it, that's a sign of sincerity to the deen, right? So in virtue, in that sense, we've been placed among the companions. If this is how the companions are behaving, right, we should aspire to do even more. The least that we can do is fulfill our obligations in our deen, and then we can worry about that which is voluntary. And we don't fulfill the obligations. Again, reminding to myself before anyone else, our salah. Look at so many stories where companions were stabbed, companions were killed, right? In their salah, in martyrdom. Even that, on top of that, right? Companions, what? They would get wounded and they would still continue their prayer. And they would leave things right when revelation came. All of these things, all of this inclination to the deen is something that we should follow as well. And another example that I want to give, and inshallah we can end off on this. We just came back, our eyes came back from Saudi, and we were on Jabal Uhud. Right? For those of you that know Jabal Uhud, this was where the war of Uhud, happened. And that in and of itself is something we can talk about for hours, less than a lot of it, or it's ridiculous. But the important thing that I want to mention, right? There's one famous story about Hamza and Wahshi. You guys know the story? About the uncle of Rasulullah and Wahshi, right? So Wahshi was a slave from the Quraysh, and he had been told again, Hamza, right, was the uncle of Rasulullah. So Wahshi was a slave, an Ethiopian slave, who was promised freedom if he killed the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was to be given freedom if he kills the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, the Battle of Uhud is happening. Not only did the Quraysh already have, okay, Muslim, oh, kill him, right? That's what their mindset was. But on top of that, Wahshi, who was a slave, was further inclined, had a personal vendetta against the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because this was indirectly the individual whose faith is hand, like whose faith, his hands lying. So basically, if he kills the uncle, he's given freedom. Now, of course, anyone that's in that position as a slave, they want to be free. So not only is he inclined to kill Muslim, but on top of that, he has a personal vendetta against the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, a brief details, background of the Battle of Uhud, right? Muslims just won the Battle of Badr. They're coming off a high, they were outnumbered significantly. They were, had less artillery, but they still won by the sake of Allah. And the Quraysh they took a bit of an ego hit, right? So now they're coming in strong and very hard. The Muslims are winning at a point. Then we have the whole story of the Archers Hill, where the archers abandoned their positions against the command of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Khalid bin Walid, who we talked about, who was again one of the causes of this happening. Although there was not a moral victory, but the scholars, some of it is different. Some say it was a loss, but it was not a direct loss on paper. Muslims technically still won, right? But what happens is archers abandon their hill. Khalid comes from behind and attacks the Muslims, and now the Quraysh are starting to beat the Muslims, right? Before the tide changes, right? Muslims are winning. They were doing pretty good. Then everything changes because of the fact that archers abandoned their position. Now, Wahshi sees the uncle of Rasulullah, throws a spear, kills him, right? Goes right through his chest, kills the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, this is a very, very prominent figure in Islam. This is the uncle of Rasulullah. So anything that upset Rasulullah upset the companions, right? To the point, example, sidetrack. There was one time when a companion, I always use this example when it comes to mannerisms and compassion. There was an individual who came to Rasulullah, asked him a question, I'll make something halal. And Rasulullah, we gave this example, right? In regards to the compassion of Rasulullah, the companion that came to ask that question was being attacked by the companions. Why would you ask such a question? While Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is remaining calm, right? He's calm, he's relaxed, he's cool, he's talking to that companion. What happens is other companions are mad at the fact that the companion asked such a ridiculous question. So this goes to show how protective they were of Rasulullah. This is the messenger of Allah. Of course he was being protective, So just keep that in mind. This was how it was like a gem to them, right? Precious. That was the way Rasulullah was when it came to the companions. So Wahshi kills the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and on top of that, bodies were mutilated when it came to the Muslims, right? Because there was a little bit of an ego hit when it came to the Battle of Badr before it. So the mutilated bodies, it wasn't just kill them, move on. No, tear them apart, take out their organs, all these things to kind of not only physically win, but at the same time emotionally, put a hit on the Muslims as well. So long story short, things go on, and Wahshi eventually becomes interested in Islam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was inclined to invite Wahshi to Islam. So just for the sake of time, right? Wahshi ends up accepting Islam. Wahshi, the one who killed the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ends up accepting Islam. Now, I mentioned how the companions were very protective of Rasulullah, right? I mentioned how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself also, by the way, did not, he accepted Wahshi's Islam, and all of his rights were fulfilled as a Muslim. His only request was that he couldn't look at Wahshi, because what? When he would look at Wahshi, remember his uncle, and what happened to his uncle. That was the only emotion that was present, right? Besides that, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was accepting of Wahshi's Islam. But my point is the companions. The companions themselves forgave Wahshi for what he did. The companions, numerous times has this been happening, where someone does something, and it gets the companions in general pretty upset. And they ask for forgiveness, they do something as a means of forgiveness, and the companions are extremely forgiving. Because this is what our Islam teaches us. They put aside their emotions, they put aside any bias, they put aside anything and everything that it was, and they were only focused on forgiving the person. All of us have flaws, all of us have sins. Wahshi as well, right? But what did they do? They were focused on forgiving. And that was the example of Rasulullah. Right? Now, for us, what happens? Someone calls me a little bit of a nickname that I don't like, I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. I don't forget about it ever again. That's the way that we behave. That is opposite, contrary to the way the Sunnah teaches us to behave. Right? Opposite of the way we're supposed to behave. Now, this was the example of the companions. To summarize, basically, before we wrap it up, inshallah, prioritizing Islam. Right? We're humans. We have factors, we have biases, we have a lot of things that kind of sway our judgment. The most important thing is we focus on what Islam teaches. That's number one. Putting that first and foremost. That should be your moral compass. That should be your criteria or your guideline when it comes to Quran. That should be your guideline when it comes to decision making. Whatever it is that Islam teaches, do it. Whatever it is that Islam doesn't teach, avoid it. That's number one. Number two, be inclined. Right? Be inclined to prioritize Islam. Making sure that you're putting your salah first, making sure that you're putting the commands of Allah first, making sure that you're abiding by what Islam teaches you. These are the most important things, right? It's not enough for me to understand Islam. It's important that I actually practice it. It's important that I'm inclined to practice it, right? And I was mentioning this to someone as well. It's easy to say, oh, do this, it's haram, or don't do this because it's haram, right? When that haram action is something you already don't like, right? For those of you, for example, there's someone that is like me. They say, oh, pork is haram, don't eat it. You know? It's easy for them, they already don't like it. But when it comes to avoiding something that you actually like, that's when your deen is tested. That's when your sincerity to Islam is tested. That's when your loyalty to Islam is tested. So making sure that you prioritize Islam, making sure that you understand what Islam teaches so that way you can apply it to your life, and making sure that you are inclined to practice it the way the companions were. Making sure that you practice Islam, making sure that you prioritize your salah, making sure that whatever it is, Islam comes first. Right? Many more stories we can talk about, a lot more things that we can discuss, but this is the most important things. Right? These are the most important lessons when it comes to all of this. So making sure that you abide by this, and there's many, many more stories that we can talk about when it comes to the companions, but I think for the sake of time, we'll wrap it up, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to abide by the deen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to stay firm on the deen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to abide by the deen, unite in Jannah, allow us to understand the deen, increase our knowledge. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those of our brothers and sisters across the globe that are being oppressed, to lift that oppression and that injustice, and allow those that are oppressing to be given justice. Jazakumullah khair. We're open for any questions if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, complaints. Oh, it's the problem, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once again to allow us to learn and apply everything that we learn. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be united in Jannah. Jazakumullah khair.
Tomorrow, January 27th, is our annual youth conference at NYU. This is your final chance to get your tickets if you still plan on attending. We have a big Al-Aqsa Doctor Festival on February 17th to 18th. The Arabic session will take place on Saturday, January 17th, and the English session will be on Sunday, January 18th. There will also be a girls-only session on the 18th from 4 to 5 p.m. Again, Mass Reverts Reconnect is holding the pre-Ramadan conference at our center this year. It will be held on February 24th. Make sure you register as soon as possible. All the Sisters Holocaust and Mass New York are also collaborating to create a Sisters Qiyam night. This year, it will be held on February 2nd, inshallah, at Mass Youth Center in Brooklyn. It will be from 7 to 11 p.m. Starting next week, we will also be starting our pre-Ramadan series, so make sure you come back for that, inshallah. Jazakallah khair everyone for attending today, and we'll see you next week.